everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spoffer, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkowitz, coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. And West Lambeau Field will be the host location of Sunday Night Football. We are here to talk about the Packers against the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. It's a big one for both teams. The Packers have gotten themselves back in the mix a little bit here in the NFC. The Chiefs are chasing that lone first-round bye that only the number one seed in each conference gets. Under the lights, and maybe there'll be a superstar in a music superstar in a Lambeau suite somewhere. I guess we'll find that out at some point. But this is about football, and this is going to be a really, really exciting, entertaining, and highly anticipated game.
Do you know something I don't know about Mick Jagger being here or something? I got jokes. Bad dad jokes.
Swifty Night Football is what some people might be calling this.
That's neat.
But
I get it, understand it. I'm a part of it. I enjoy Taylor Swift's music. But I got some goosebumps in the locker room on Wednesday, and it had nothing to do with Travis Kelce or Taylor Swift or pop culture. Had to do with Jon Runyan. And I was pushing you big on the Jon Runyan press, the press scrum yesterday. But Runyan had a moment near the end of his scrum where he got to talking about Sunday Night Football. And Sunday Night Football specifically in the month of December. And the thing that he sort of have to remember is his first 2 years here, NFC Championship game, big year in 2021, number one seed, a lot of Sunday night action.
Yeah.
And he said, there's a lot of young guys on this team that haven't felt it yet. But there is something special when you walk out on Lambeau Field and you see your breath. You get those kind of chills, those late fall, early winter vibes.
Yeah.
And there's something that just brings it out of you. And him doing that, it almost kind of, to me, was like when people describe like baking a cake or Thanksgiving dinner. Like it got me revved up for it, right? Because this game in itself, it sells itself.
Yeah.
Green Bay Packers surging, offense coming together, 5-6, very much alive now in this playoff hunt. And then the Kansas City Chiefs. I think when you look at marketability, branding, this team is the face of the National Football League. Defending Super Bowl champions. And it's not just Patrick Mahomes. It's the guys that have gotten a light put on them beyond that. I think of a guy like Chris Jones. I think of, these players that have been making an impact, but more importantly have been winning football games. So as you talk to me about this and we preview this game here coming up, I'm just so excited to be back in December and obviously have a very meaningful football game in front of us.
Yeah, well, looking at the Kansas City Chiefs and the season that they have had coming off of their second Super Bowl title in the last handful of years, they started off with a loss in that Thursday night kickoff opener to the Detroit Lions, but then they bounced back from that. They won 6 games in a row. They were 6-1. But now they've lost 2 of their last 4. Now, granted, one of those was a big Monday night game, under the lights against the Philadelphia Eagles, the top seed in the NFC. Really good game, came right down to the wire. Those kind of things happen. But there have been a lot of questions about the Chiefs' offense this year because it hasn't been the explosive point-producing machine that it has been under Patrick Mahomes. With Patrick Mahomes at the helm in recent years. But I tell you what, Wes, I know the Raiders have had, their share of ups and downs and everything this year, and they have the coaching situation going on there and all that. But the Chiefs last week, they were behind 14-0 out of the gate to the Las Vegas Raiders. And they ended up winning that game in a runaway. They scored 4 touchdowns in a span of 5 possessions and absolutely blew out the Raiders after a slow start. I think the Chiefs are getting to where they're answering some questions about the offense and getting to where maybe this offense is going to start revving up for the stretch run right when and where Kansas City wants it to. And this is going to be a big-time challenge for Green Bay's defense to slow these guys down.
The Chiefs are in an interesting position in 2 different ways. One, you obviously want to win as many games as you can. You want the number 1 seed. But I think from Kansas City's perspective, with as much confidence as they have in Patrick Mahomes and that defense, they're thinking more about how do we set ourselves up here to propel ourselves into the postseason to try to make this back-to-back run. But when I look specifically at the offense and I look at Mahomes in this thing, in a lot of ways, Mike, it sort of even reminds me of those Brett Favre years after the Super Bowl, after Mike Holmgren, where it was like, you knew you had Brett Favre. You might not have known all the other names around him, but you had Brett Favre, and you were going to be able to score points, and you're going to have production. Maybe a few too many interceptions for your liking, but you're going to move the football with, no disrespect to him, but the Antonio Chapmans of the world.
Sure.
Not to say that Kansas City's in that predicament, but it's Travis Kelce, and it's a wide variety of receivers that are around him. There is not a Tyreek Hill that's going to command 110 receptions. It's going to be a little bit of Sky Moore. It's going to be a little bit of MVS, and obviously Rashee Rice, who's coming on here for them lately as well.
Yeah.
And they're all dangerous. That's my main takeaway from where they are sitting right now is you can't take them for granted in that because, as Kenny Clark was discussing, strictly speaking with Patrick Mahomes, he's one of the rare quarterbacks that can beat you from the pocket and with his feet. And when those two things come together, it makes it really difficult in terms of a defense trying to contain that weapon for 4 quarters.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a little bit of research with regard to Mahomes because he is the offense's second leading rusher for Kansas City behind Pacheco, who has, I believe it's 669 yards and 5 touchdowns.
That's correct.
But what I did is with Mahomes being the second leading rusher on the team, he's averaging 5.8 yards per carry. But I went back through the Chiefs play-by-plays and counted up all of the end of half or end of game, usually end of game kneel downs by Mahomes. And when you take those out, he's had 15 kneel downs for minus 17 yards this season. If you take those out, he's averaging 8.5 yards every time he takes off and scrambles. That's a chain-moving scrambler is what that is. He can absolutely kill you on third downs where you can defend that offense for 5 or 6 or even 7 seconds as well as you could possibly defend Kelce and Rashee Rice and MVS and all these other guys. And then Mahomes will still find a way to move the chains because when he takes off, he finds a lane. He maybe makes a guy miss. He has the angle just to get to that first down marker. That's where I think this Packers defense that has certainly shown some growth and some progress. Yes, there was some bad run defense against Pittsburgh, but Kenny Pickett didn't do a whole lot in that game. The Packers contained Jared Goff. They haven't faced a quarterback like this who can be so dangerous when you defend the offense so well. And I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on come Sunday night.
Something else I thought was really funny. You were the one to bring it to light for me about how much at the end of these second quarters they've been scoring. I mean,
Harrison. Well, that's when I was doing the research on the kneel downs, I'm looking through their play-by-plays, and it's like every time I look at the second quarter, I'm like, oh, the Chiefs scored again. Oh, the Chiefs scored a field goal on the last play of the half or a touchdown with 5 seconds left in the first half. That's the other thing I was going to bring up because that prompted me to look up another statistic. The Chiefs have scored more than half of their points of the entire season in the second quarter.
Yeah.
132 of their 256 points have come in the second quarter. To be this many games into the season and to have more than half your points in one quarter of play, that's like almost unheard of. It's uncanny. Mm-hmm. But so the point is, if the Packers and Jordan Love in the offense, if they're going to put together a 15-play, 10-minute scoring drive, make it in the second quarter so that Mahomes doesn't have quite so many chances to score points. Anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you. You were going to make a point.
That was basically my point. I mean, just to quickly put this out there, 132 points in the second quarter. The Jets have 163 for the season. I mean, this is a unit that plays well and it plays to its strengths. And if I may, just to kind of give you another preview of when you have confidence and you have a core and a nucleus with their offense, defense, and special teams. Last week, we were talking with Detroit about how Green Bay got off to that fast start, and they used the complementary phase of football to basically ice it, right? Kansas City, look at some of these statistics on them. Mike, they've returned 5 kickoffs this season. They don't return kickoffs. They don't return kickoffs. I mean, when you look at Travis Kelce, 70 receptions for 732 yards, 5 touchdowns. The guy's 33, 34 years old now at this point in his career. I made the case in Insider Inbox. In my money, he does this for another 2-3 years. You're talking about the greatest tight end of all time.
Yeah.
With all due respect to Tony Gonzalez, another great Kansas City Chief. But defensively, they have 6 takeaways in terms of interceptions. Like, there are ways to beat Kansas City, and if you look at the games in which they've lost this year, the 3 of them, it's because of those things getting away from them. So for as dynamic as they are, I don't want to call them predictable because that'd be doing a disservice to all this, but there is a very clear blueprint for how you beat the Chiefs. The question for the Packers is, can you play to that level in order to achieve it?
Yeah, I mean, when you look on the other side of the ball, this Kansas City Chiefs defense, and I'm not pretending to be an expert on the Chiefs and this run they've had with.
Before we walked in here, you told me you were an expert on the Chiefs and this run that they're currently on.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not.
Okay, you lied.
But this run that includes 2 Super Bowl championships, 3 AFC championships in the last handful of years. This might be, Wes, the best defense that they've had during this run. They are 3rd in the league in points allowed, 4th in the league in yards allowed. They've racked up 37 sacks. Steve Spagnuolo, this defense is all about generating pressure on the quarterback, getting you into, the tough down and distances that force you to throw, and then Spagnuolo will dial up these exotic looks, these crazy blitzes, and make you react to them on the fly. George Karlaftis leads the defense with 8 sacks of those 37, but the engine in the middle of that defense is Chris Jones. You mentioned his name before. He has 7.5 sacks, but that doesn't even begin to illustrate what he means to this Chiefs defense. He is a massive dude in the middle of that defensive line. And even sometimes, as big as he is, they'll still line him up almost more in an edge rushing position or even a 5 technique type of thing. He's not necessarily on the interior all the time, but man, he is a handful. And he plugs up the middle, run and pass, and gets after the quarterback. He's like an Aaron Donald in a sense. But he's Aaron Donald with a heck of a lot more size, and just a guy that you have to game plan for. And I'm very curious to see how the Packers can handle him on Sunday night.
Yeah, and he's not like he's 6'6", 340. He's about 6'6", 315 in that range. And if you want to see the difference in that Kansas City defense, and when we talk about like quarterbacks, right, MVPs, what do the Chiefs look like without Patrick Mahomes? What do the Miami Dolphins look like without Tua? Look at what this Kansas City defense looked like against Detroit in week 1 when Jones was still holding out. Different unit. This guy is the playmaker. He is the centerpiece. He is everything. When you talk about defensive line play and versatility, he exudes all of it. And as I was talking with Kenny Clark about, because one of the questions I asked Kenny on Wednesday was, how much he studies other defensive tackles, and he studies them all. And he isolated 3 things with him that stand out. It is the size. It obviously is the length, but it's the hands. And when you are that big and you can keep people off of you the way that he does,
right,
it doesn't matter if you're getting triple teamed sometimes.
Right.
The guy's violent enough with his hands that it makes it very difficult for another 300-pound human being to stay in front of him for any sustained amount of time. Chiefs did the right thing. Things did not go well defensively against the Lions. They missed Chris Jones in that game. They took care of him financially. They found a way to make it work. And since he's been back, he's been exceptional. I'll just throw out there, too, George Karlaftis. Even though I'm not a scout by any means, he was one of my favorite guys from the draft a couple years ago.
Coming out of Purdue.
And he's developed into more of an all-around pass rusher. That's been the biggest difference I think I've seen with him this season. Yes, he gets the sacks, but he's doing a little bit more of the little things, too. With that linebacker core behind them, when you talk about front sevens, I think right now in the National Football League, Kansas City's as good as they come, regardless of how much Steve Spagnuolo is pressuring.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a defense that has proven tough to beat throughout the course of the season. One other note I'll throw out there with regard to the Chiefs on special teams: Harrison Butker hasn't missed a kick all season. He's 28 out of 28 on his extra points, and he's 20 out of 20 on field goals, a couple of those being from 56 and from 60 yards. So it's not like he's perfect on field goals with just a bunch of 35 yards and in kicks. He's made some long ones, a couple of really long ones, and he's a big piece of this Chiefs team as well. As I said, the number of times, and I wish I had actually counted it up because I was obviously working on another statistic. I wish I had counted it up when I was looking at it. The number of times that Harrison Butker has made a field goal on the last play of the first half is crazy this year. It's happened. I'd be willing to bet it's happened at least 6 or 7 times in their 11 games based on when I was going back through their play-by-plays.
You just look at the special teams coordinator, the unit that they put together there with Townsend, the operation, it's all consistent. It's, you know what you're getting day in and day out with it, and they've been doing it together for years. And correct me if I'm wrong here, again, I wasn't researching this as thoroughly as you did, but I think Buckner even had an injury earlier this year that he might have been playing through a little bit. I mean,
it could be, yeah. I'm not entirely familiar with what his situation was health-wise.
But being able to be as consistent as he's been and be put in some of those situations and embrace it the way he has, we're entering this stretch, Mike, where you're getting you don't expect perfection, but it seems like NFL teams are demanding it more now from their kickers.
Yeah.
And with somebody like Buckner, and with how many opportunities you're going to get when Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback. You need a good kicker, and Kansas City certainly has one.
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier there's a blueprint to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. I want to give you a chance to outline that blueprint, but we will do so right after our sponsor business here. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousins Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50 years of better. All right, well, it's keys to victory time. You mentioned the blueprint. Outline it for us. How do the Packers win this football game?
Yeah, Coach Wes Hodkowitz over here with my middle school background in football. There's 3 things that I see with this. One is, as dangerous as Kansas City is, they are erratic, and they've had big drops this season. I don't mean to throw MVS under the bus with that, but certainly you go back a couple weeks ago, and that was the difference between a win and a loss for them. They can hurt you, but they're going to give you some chances. They're -5 right now on turnover margin for the season. I think that ranks like 24th in the National Football League.
That's amazing to be -5 in turnovers and be 8-3
that
with,
means
with your
what
record.
do you got to do?
Here.
If your defense gets the opportunities, you have to convert them into points. And lastly, for as much as this is always going to be about Mahomes, Kelsey, and these weapons, the run game is such an interesting part of this equation for Kansas City. Isaiah Pacheco was a fantastic find for them late in the rounds. I believe there was a local scout here from Green Bay that was the one that was responsible for that a number of years ago for Kansas City. But when they don't run the football, that's the blueprint. When you can stop them from having success and putting them in 3rd and longs, that's the blueprint. Watch any of the losses that they've had this season. That's when they get in bad situations. And, Kadarius Toney had a really rough game, earlier this season under those circumstances where they're trying to convert 3rd and longs in drop passes turned into interceptions, and in some cases, I believe, a pick 6. So stopping Pacheco, stopping, whoever they throw at you, whether it's McKinnon or Edwards-Helaire, just being able to make sure they don't get as much room as possible there. Keep them in 3rd and longs. Yes, this game will be in Patrick Mahomes' hands. It's just the way that this thing goes.
Yeah.
But you don't want to make his life any easier. I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. And for me, the two things that stand out to me in this game, if you're looking at keys to victory for the Packers, the first one is it's all about protection. Protection of Jordan Love. And I say that not just because of, the game 2 years ago in Kansas City when Love was thrown in there, when Rodgers had COVID and he had just a couple days to prepare, and then Spagnuolo blitzed the heck out of the Packers and, kind of wrecked their offense really for 3.5 quarters. It's not because of that. It's because of how this 2023 Chiefs defense is playing, because watching, for example, the Monday night game a couple of weeks ago against the Philadelphia Eagles, a Super Bowl rematch and everything, and a Super Bowl that was very high scoring. That game became a defensive slog for a while.
Yep.
the Chiefs were not doing much offensively, but that defense was making life really difficult for a while for Jalen Hurts and that Eagles offense because of the pressure up front, because of all of the disruption. The Packers have done a really good job in recent weeks against Aaron Donald, against TJ Watt, against Khalil Mack, and then obviously this last game again against Aiden Hutchinson. These are the elite of the elite, and Chris Jones is another guy who ranks right up there. And the Packers have to continue what they've been doing to neutralize that guy in the opponent's defensive front who is the most disruptive and has the most potential to wreck what you're doing. The other thing for me, aside from the protection of Jordan Love in this game, then, is just to limit the big plays defensively. The Chiefs have shown this year they can put together 10, 11, 12 play drives and go down the field and score. But that's what you have to make them do, because if they hit you for the big plays and they score quickly, then that is when their point total can get up into the 28 and the 31 and the 34 point range. And I don't think the Packers want to get into that kind of a game with the Kansas City Chiefs. Limit the big plays, make them go the distance. Maybe they make a mistake. They are playing on the road. We'll see what the weather is like and everything like that on Sunday night. You got to tackle Travis Kelce as soon as he catches the ball. You can't let him turn 6-yard passes into 16, 18-yard gains with broken tackles. That kind of thing is what I'm talking about in terms of limiting the big plays. So for me, those are the two things at the top of my list: protection and cutting down on explosives.
And if there was ever a game for the Green Bay Packers to get back some of these injured players on the defensive side of the ball, this is the one. Because I give a lot of credit to Isaiah McDuffie for how he stood in there this season for both Walker and Campbell.
Yeah.
But if Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker are both out there, that makes life easier if you're in base against the Travis Kelce.
Yep.
If you have Darnell Savage there, if you potentially where however this shakes out at cornerback, there is a domino effect to the rest of it with Jair Alexander. So I just think it's a critical game, and it's a big moment for Green Bay. I have implored people. My biggest message in this thing is, regardless of what the outcome is, maybe other than a tie, but regardless of the outcome, win or lose, you can't get too high or too low with this.
Yep.
The Packers win it, it's not the Super Bowl. The Packers lose it, you have 5 games coming up here, and honestly, Mike, more I look at this thing, I think it's going to take 7 good victories to make the playoffs. The Packers need to bring as many of those together, whether it's beating Kansas City or Carolina. You have to put some of these victories together and keep building on what they've done well here in their last 3 games.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a quick look here at some other games around the NFL in Week 13. Actually, there's an important one in the NFC tonight, Thursday night. Seattle is at Dallas for Thursday Night Football. Second straight Thursday game for both of these teams.
Yep.
They both played on Thanksgiving a week ago. The league seems to have gotten into that pattern that the Thursday night game after Thanksgiving is 2 teams that had played on Thanksgiving. So,
yeah.
That seems to be...
The computer's just rebelling against the system, I guess.
Yeah. So, but that's obviously a very interesting one in terms of the NFC playoff picture. A couple others that I think Packers fans will probably have their eye on Sunday. Before the Packers and Chiefs kick off on Sunday night, Detroit is at New Orleans. Cleveland is at the Rams. So those games involve some teams that are in the mix there with the Packers. And then the biggest game on Sunday in the afternoon anyway is San Francisco at Philadelphia, a rematch of the NFC Championship from last year when Brock Purdy got hurt and the Eagles kind of cruised to that victory to get into the Super Bowl. Man, how many times, speaking of the schedule and the computer spitting things out, how many times has there been a Super Bowl rematch and a conference championship rematch within a span of like 3 weeks or whatever it's been?
Wild,
that's kind of crazy when you think about it. But anyway, so Niners and Eagles, I think we'll all be watching the finish of that in the press box before Packers and Chiefs kick off. Your thoughts on any of those games here in Week 13?
Well, the New Orleans one is very interesting to me because as we've been talking about, the Lions, take nothing away from them. That was a very hard-fought game last week, but the Lions are kind of going through some things right now. They haven't really been hitting on all cylinders like they were, even before that game against Green Bay. So seeing how they match up in the Superdome against the Saints, who have proven to be basically, it's kind of a coin flip with them every week, it feels like. I mean, they certainly are a much different team with Alvin Kamara. There's no doubt about that. But trying to figure out them has been a really big challenge. They're so unconventional offensively with what Taysom Hill continues to do.
Yep.
I just, in any given week, I don't really know what you get, and in most cases, it ends up being around 500, right? So seeing how the Lions respond to that is going to be major. But I mean, it is all about San Francisco and Philly, and seeing how Hurts has been kind of banged up. The 49ers kind of went through some doldrums there, but now they've kind of pulled it together.
Yeah.
You talk about being a repeat of the past NFC Championship game. I'm sure Kyle Shanahan, the way he's looking at this is our measuring stick. This is where we got to get this team to if we're finally going to solve the Philly problem. There's going to be 5 other problems in the playoffs in the NFC side of things, but you go back to the years with San Francisco and Dallas in the 90s, this is how these things go. So I'm sure they're going to tackle this thing very with that much vigor and seeing if they could finally pass that test. I do have a quick question for you, because I still don't really understand the flex scheduling for Monday Night Football.
Okay.
Is there any part of you that was surprised there wasn't movement with Cincinnati and in Jacksonville, or was it just too late because of the Burrow thing?
I think the
people really want to see Trevor Lawrence?
Burrow injury might have happened too late in that regard. That's my best guess. But that being said, Jacksonville, and I know Jacksonville doesn't have the market size and the fan following, but Jacksonville is a playoff team.
Yep.
They were last year. They're leading their division and everything right now.
Did you watch that Bengals-Steelers game, though, last week?
I watched a good portion of it, That was pretty rough.
I was looking for some leaves to rake or something, but I kept watching. Because the only reason I even bring up the Monday Night Football thing is because it keeps getting asked in Insider Inbox about the Packers Monday night game against the Giants. I don't expect there to be any movement, especially since the Jets play there on Sunday, right?
Yeah, and the deadline is passed now anyway, but I always thought from the beginning, because the Jets have a home game at MetLife on Sunday afternoon, and then they scheduled the Giants for the Monday. So the only way to flex it is essentially to then move the Jets to the Monday night game, which I don't know if that's any more attractive, because Aaron Rodgers is back at practice now, but he's not active. He's not going to be playing.
And we've watched a lot of Jets primetime games.
Yeah, the Jets were put in a lot of big spotlight games for obvious reasons, and then with Rodgers' injury, those haven't turned out to be the games, other than when they beat the Eagles, which is the Eagles' only loss this season. That was the one the country was watching, and that was what. The game that everybody thought, oh, maybe the Jets are going to be all right here, but they're not. I'll say this with regard to the Eagles and the Niners. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. And I know mathematically nothing will be decided, but man, if the Eagles win this game, they basically have the number 1 seed. Yeah. I mean, they're not, yes, mathematically it won't be official, but they're going to get, if they win this game, they're going to get the number 1 seed. They're going to get the bye. The only chance in my opinion, for the Niners to actually steal that number 1 seed and the bye is for the Niners to go into the Link on Sunday and get that win and tighten things up.
It's kind of like the marathon when you have the person that's out front by a couple miles. I mean, the Eagles closed the season, Arizona Giants. I mean, if you're going to get them, you better get them quick.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd.
Yeah, and the Niners could win this game, and the Eagles could still get the number 1
absolutely.
seed because
but you got to help
they
your
only
cause.
have the one loss. I mean, them pulling off that overtime victory when they were trailing throughout the game, trailing at the end of the fourth quarter, even trailing in overtime, but they pulled out that game against Buffalo to still be sitting there with just the one loss. The Eagles are sitting in the catbird seat, as I like to say.
As you like to say. It's a big Spoffordism.
Should be a good game tonight, though. Dallas against the Seahawks. The Cowboys obviously trying to keep pace with the Eagles. The Seahawks, they've hit the skids a little bit. Kenneth Walker's been injured. A lot of Packers fans will be watching to see if the Cowboys can hand Seattle a 6th loss.
And more than anything, Geno Smith versus that Cowboys defense.
Yeah.
That Cowboys defense, you thought they were going to lose something earlier this season.
Yeah, and they lost one of their best players, but But yeah, look
Here
out.
comes blank just out of nowhere being like, hey, I'm going to return every interception for a touchdown.
For a touchdown and set an NFL record. That was something too. I didn't realize when he got that 5th pick six. The last time somebody had 4 pick sixes in a season was 30 years ago. It was 1993. It was like, holy cow! I didn't realize it had been that long. But I guess that just shows I'm getting old.
And you think about it too. I mean, how often is it that a guy either has that much speed or is just that far removed from everybody else to be able to take it?
Yeah.
You know, and like, yes, there is a Deion Sanders type skill towards it, right? But a lot of times there's so many other variables that go into returning an interception.
Right.
And
well, yeah, you can't have any of your teammates block somebody in the back either, which
too.
happens a lot on interception returns. But when that doesn't happen, obviously you got a chance to take it. But yeah, should be a good one Thursday night, a big game in terms of the NFC playoff picture. A lot of Packers fans will be watching leading up to Sunday night. And with that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team and everything from Sunday night's game against the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. We will have it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.